What's going on, everyone? So when they killed Dewey Riley in Scream 5, it really kind of split many in the Scream fandom, right? Many people understood it. Many people were okay with it. Many people wanted it, but there was a large group that just didn't and were very upset, very disappointed, and didn't like that they killed off Dewey Riley. Now, I wasn't like super thrilled or happy about it, but I understood it. I got it. Right? I didn't want to see Dewey die. I love Dewey as a character. You know, obviously, we want the OG3 to be in every movie forever, right? If they could come out with a new movie every year and they have Dewey, Gale, and Sidney, right? We want them in the movies. I get that. I understand that. But for the most part, right, eventually you're going to have to move off these guys. The same thing I've talked about like with Sidney, right? At some point, we're going to have a Scream movie that doesn't have Sidney, Gale, and Dewey in it. Obviously, we've had a Scream movie that didn't have Dewey and Sidney in it. But at some point, you're going to have new cast, new direction, new everything. Whether it's this upcoming Scream 7, right, with now Melissa Berrara and Jenna Ortega removed from this project. We'll see what direction they go. Do they go fresh start? Do they kind of do something wild? Do they make it a Sidney-centric film? We will see. Time will tell. But I was kind of the mind with Dewey that, like, I got it. I understood. It wasn't a surprise, right? I mean, they set up and laid the table perfectly for like, hey, Dewey's going to die in this movie, right? We all kind of were like, are they really going to do it? But ultimately we knew, yeah, it's coming. And then when you had this scene, you knew, okay, this is the moment. I can't believe this is really about to happen. And sure enough, it happened, right? And I get it because, you know, if we're being honest, there were no real stakes as far as the OG3. You knew Dewey was going to get stabbed 40 times a movie and then give the thumbs up at the end. You knew in any compromise situation, compromise scene, that Gale, Dewey, and Sidney, they were going to make it out. But by killing Dewey, right, you kind of change that perception. Now when Gale is in a scene and she's, you know, being attacked, it's like, are they really about to kill Gale? Right? You kind of change the outlook for and kind of raise the bar a little bit. I get it. But now you're in this like weird stage to where you got to figure something out and what you're going to do with Scream 7. Now you have Scream 5 and 6, and they could very well kind of just write those movies off or kind of have them be like an alternative thing. We have seen many horror franchises kind of have that approach where they just have these group of movies that are just different from the alternative timeline or the original timeline. They are an alternative timeline. So is it possible that they just bring back the OG3, right? Like, just say like Scream 5 and 6 were kind of its own thing. It was fun. It was great, right? Maybe pick up right back after Scream 4. And you have Sidney, you know, she's with Kincaid, she's with all that stuff. She's living her best life. Maybe Dewey and Gale are still together and they're still, you know, happily married. Dewey's still the sheriff of Woodsboro, right? And you kind of have this like, hey, Scream 5 and 6 were fun, weren't they? They were great. That's the little Sam story. That's a little Offset story. Here are the OG cast back front and center, ready to go again. Right? Like, that is something I could absolutely see them maybe potentially attempting to do. And that may end up being the safest bet. Right? Because that's the concern, right? Like, what are they going to do? There's only so many options that they have for the upcoming Scream 7 because we're going to get Scream 7. So they either A, just kind of continue the direction that they're going and, you know, make it a Sidney-focused film, or they just go a whole new direction and hit a fresh start reboot type thing to where you just don't have any of them in it and it's just like a new cast or whatever. Or you just kind of say, hey, like those were fun movies. Those were kind of its own thing. We're just going to tell a story that piggybacks off of Scream 4, right? And here you go. Here's the continued story, continued pattern, right? This is a Sidney-centric film. You still have Dewey. This time we're not going to kill him. You know, you got Gale. This time we're not going to kill her. You know, maybe we rough him up a little bit and make you have the idea that we're going to, but ultimately we don't. And you kind of just get back to the safe movie because that might be the best course of action for Scream is just play it safe. because I don't know if they can really run the risk of rolling the dice here, right? Because you already are going through the nightmare of what you did to Melissa Berrara, and now Jenna Ortega leaving, whether it has anything to do with Melissa or not, right? They're trying to play it off like it wasn't, like this is something that has been known and planned for months or whatever. At best case, it's weird timing, right? It's like this happens to Melissa and then we find out about Jenna Ortega leaving. Like, it's just, the timing is questionable. But you're dealing with all this stuff, right? Yes, this will blow over. All things like this do. Eventually, people move on, they forget about it, they just don't care anymore, or whatever, right? And what will happen is they will make the announcement, Scream 7 is done, it's ready to go, all that stuff, and then you're going to have a little bit of the pressure again. And if you don't make the right call here, you really run the risk of just chasing people away. There's already people planning on boycotting this movie, and there's already people planning on just writing this franchise off now, and there's all of that. And you're never going to appease everybody. You're never going to be able to bring everybody back and everybody in, but you are going to have a lot of people that will come back if you make this movie focused on the OG3 again. You are, because you're going to have people that are just curious, for one. You're going to have people that always just wanted it to be an OG3 movie, right? You're going to have the people that are just fans and you're going to have a large number and majority and group of people that are going to return solely because of Sidney Prescott, Dewey Riley, and Gale Weathers, right? Those are the three that built the franchise. Those are the most significant characters. Many of us, again, I am of the mind, and I said this after Scream 5. I said this going into Scream 5, that I thought that they should have had a new, fresh approach, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. And now they are kind of handcuffed and in this awkward position because they didn't just go fresh, right? Like, Scream 5 didn't have to tie into Billy. You could have done the exact same movie, exactly. Nothing changes if you don't make Sam Billy's daughter. Right? You could have made her anything else, or just somebody that lives in Woodsboro, whatever, right? And had a connection and tie in to the past, right? You could have made the exact same movie and not had Sam be Billy's daughter. It would have been that simple. But now you handcuffed yourself to the past and all that. It's just, it's weird and awkward to be in, So if they would have done and went a fresh start, then you could have gone into Scream 7, and because Scream 6 was such a conclusive ending, you could have just said, hey, here's a new, fresh Scream movie with the new cast, right? So you had the 4 with Sidney, Gale, and Dewey. Then you had the 2, which was the Sam story. And now here is a new, fresh take on Scream. And in many ways, I do think that that's the approach that they should do. I just don't see them doing that because that's not necessarily the safe approach. But Gale, Sidney, Dewey are the safe approach, right? You know that if you get those 3 united and you get them back, then, it's the old saying, if you build it, they will come. And people will come. Everyone's going to go watch it because Gale, Sidney, and Dewey are going to be in it. And this could be the last movie that they're in it. And so everyone's going to want to see, how do they approach this? So they could continue after Scream 4, like I said. You could even just continue after Scream 3. You may even be able to do a new trilogy, right? Granted, Scream 7 would have to be good, right? But you could, if you wanted to, which may end up, that might be the smartest approach, but if you wanted to continue this and pump this out, you basically just say, again, Scream 4 was its own thing, which it kind of was in many ways. It's almost like a standalone film. Didn't tie in much to the original 3 films, if at all, and was kind of like its own thing, right? It was supposed to be the beginning of a new trilogy, right? They had other plans for Scream 5 and 6 that just never panned out. Wes Craven, rest in peace. But you could look at it as okay, Scream 4, it's its own thing. It's standalone film. Scream 5 and 6 were this alternate timeline thing. It was this fun, just 2-movie experiment. There you go. And then just, here's a new trilogy, OG3, final story, tying them all together, looping it in, and now you got this, Scream. I mean, you could even call it Scream 5, 6, and 7, right? Because they called Scream 5, quote unquote, Scream, and then they called Scream 6 the Roman numeral. So you could just call it Scream 4, 5, and 6 if you wanted to. Well, not 4, but, you get my point. Like, you could call it, like, Scream Return to Woodsboro or something, and then, or it's a subname or whatever, right? Like, there's so many approaches, so many different ways that you could go about it, is my point, right? And you could realistically just do a new trilogy with Gale, Sidney, and Dewey, right? And then here's the final conclusion to their arc and their story. They ride off into the sunset. You kind of make up for everything. All is right in the world. You make a bunch of money. It's a win-win for everybody. That's kind of how I look at this. And I think that may end up being the safest bet and approach, right? Like, bring them all back. Let them do their thing. All right? Let them save the franchise just like they built the franchise. You right the ship. You're in good shape. Again, the movie has to be good. If you make some terrible movie, then yeah, you're up, what's creek without a paddle. But I do. I could definitely see this being the approach that they go. Bring back David Arquette, bring back Dewey. I mean, even Nev has talked about how, disappointed she was and how much she didn't like it. And she said, I usually don't, talk out, speak out about the writers, or, I'm paraphrasing whatever it was. But I didn't like that they killed off Dewey and stuff. So you could right the ship. This is probably the only opportunity you'd ever have to really do this. Bring the OG3 back like nothing happened. Scream 5 and 6 were its own thing. Pick up right after 4 or pick up after 3. Dewey and Gale are married again happily. Get to see that story and that arc continue. Sidney is with Mark Kincaid. Everything's great. And you have just basically those 4 guys. There's your new core 4. It's Sidney and Mark, Gale and Dewey. And they're battling a new Ghostface. There you go. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you think, yeah, that's the best approach, the safest approach? No, do you think, no, stay away from that, don't do that, start fresh, or just make it a Sidney film, or do whatever, continue story you're on. I just don't see how you can continue from 5 and 6 anyway, right? Like, so even if it is a Sidney-focused film, chances are it's probably going to have nothing to do with Scream 5 and 6. I mean, Sidney wasn't even in Scream 6. So regardless, Scream 7 is probably going to be its own thing. So why not just say, hey, 5 and 6 were its own thing. Here's a continuation. Here's a new Scream 5. Again, you could even call it Scream 5 if you wanted to. Scream 5, 6, and 7. There you go. It's just a thought. But anyway, again, how do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate you all. See you in the next one. Thank you.